They called you a genius once, a prodigy who could see through patterns no one else noticed. You were loyal, not to people, but to purpose. You believed in systems, in rules, in the illusion of order. You gave them your mind, your discipline, your silence, and they rewarded you with a knife between the ribs, not because you failed them, but because you saw too much. They couldn't control what they couldn't corrupt, so they turned you into a ghost, a threat. A name whispered in rooms where truth was forbidden. It happened fast, betrayal always does. One moment you were the architect of precision, decoding flaws in the network they swore was unbreakable. The next, your access was revoked, your badge revoked, your name blacklisted in every database you once built. They didn't even look you in the eyes, just a sterile email, a silent purge. You watched everything you created twisted into something you no longer recognized. Your own algorithms weaponized against you. They erased your existence like a file marked, corrupted, but deep down you understood. They weren't cleaning up a mistake, they were erasing a witness. They dragged you into a room without windows. The light was too bright, the air too thin. A faceless man across the table asked questions he already knew the answers to. His voice was calm, rehearsed, bureaucratic. Why did you breach protocol? You stared back in silence, because you knew the truth. The system was never about protection. It was about control. And when you cracked their encryption, you cracked their illusion. The moment you proved the architecture was flawed, you became the flaw. They called you dangerous, unstable, a risk to national security, as if curiosity was treason, as if awareness was a crime. You could have begged, explained, but you didn't, because you finally saw the machine for what it was, not a fortress, but a cage. You'd spent years maintaining its walls, convincing yourself it was safety. But safety was just obedience rebranded. The system fed on compliance, and you were the one who stopped kneeling. When they cuffed you, you felt something strange. Not fear, clarity. Every betrayal burns differently. This one didn't cut the flesh, it cauterized something inside you. You realized pain could be precise, a scalpel, not a wound. As they led you through the corridor, eyes followed from behind glass. Colleagues, friends, none spoke. Silence was currency in their world, and no one could afford to spend it on truth. You walked through the echo of everything you built, stripped of identity but full of power, because they took your name but not your knowledge. Outside, the rain felt almost holy, cold, heavy, cleansing. You looked up at the sky, the only thing still honest, and for the first time, you didn't feel small beneath it. You felt aligned with something ancient, something primal. Systems rise and fall, but the outcasts, the ones who see beyond the veil, they survive. Not because they're chosen, but because they're cursed to notice what others ignore. You were never meant to be loyal to them. You were meant to dismantle them. By the time they filed your case under Black Swan, it was already too late. They had turned your silence into prophecy. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were naming your evolution. Black Swan, the statistical impossibility, the outlier, the event that breaks prediction itself. You became their fear, their ghost, their equation they could no longer solve. You weren't erased, you were rewritten. And in the ruins of that betrayal, standing drenched and unbroken, you finally understood. Some people are born to obey the system, but a few, the dangerous few, are born to crash it. They stripped you of everything: name, purpose, the illusion of control. One day, you were part of the system, moving through polished corridors and smiling faces that swore loyalty. The next, you were gone, erased. The same mouths that once praised your precision now whispered poison behind locked doors. You saw your name on screens, buried under lies, repackaged as a warning to others. Don't think for yourself. You were labeled unpredictable, dangerous, a variable that couldn't be contained. And as the system turned its back, you realized something terrifying. It had never needed you. It only needed your silence. The noise faded. The phones stopped ringing. You watched your reflection flicker in a dead monitor, surrounded by the hum of failure that wasn't even yours. Nights became long, heavy stretches of thought, not about revenge, not yet, but about the architecture of betrayal itself. You began to see the structure, how every promise you believed in was designed to keep you compliant. Every title, every handshake, every ritual of success was a leash disguised as purpose. You remembered the way they said, "We're proud of you." Not because you were exceptional, but because you were useful, until you weren't. You walked through the city at night like a ghost haunting your own life. The neon lights reflected off the rain, smearing your face into colors you didn't recognize. You listened to people talk about dreams and loyalty and good intentions, and you felt something snap, not in anger, but in clarity. They were still asleep. You weren't. The fall wasn't destruction. It was exposure. When you lost everything, you finally saw the machinery beneath the world's smile. You realized that humanity wasn't built on morality. It was built on hierarchy. And the moment you stopped serving it, you became invisible. But invisibility has its own kind of power. In silence, you began to hear what they never could. The pulse beneath the system. The faint rhythm of control. Who held it, who fed it, who worshipped it. You studied betrayal like scripture. You examined every scar as if it were written in a forgotten language. The pain that once crippled you began to speak. It told you things no mentor ever could. It whispered they never destroyed you. They revealed your position on the board. You weren't a pawn. You were the anomaly, the move they couldn't predict. Time blurred. Days passed without sunlight, without sound. You stopped caring about the world outside because the real battle was happening inside. The body weakens before the mind hardens. You stopped reacting to pain. You started recording it, mapping it, turning it into patterns. Each loss, each humiliation became data. Each memory of laughter that wasn't real became evidence. And in that quiet, something ancient stirred within you. A hunger not for vengeance, but for mastery. They thought they buried you in defeat. But beneath the dirt, you built a foundation. You began to understand that pain was never your enemy. Comfort was. The same comfort that made them predictable, soft, obedient. You realized that survival wasn't about strength, it was about patience. About knowing when to move, when to wait, when to become nothing so you could return as everything. Now, when you close your eyes, you see the map, the hierarchy, the invisible chains, and somewhere deep inside, you start to smile, not out of joy, but understanding. They think you've fallen. But in truth, you've descended below the system's reach, into the underworld where power is born. You've seen the cracks in their walls. You've learned the language of shadows, and soon, when you rise, it won't be for recognition. It will be to remind them what happens when silence learns to think. You stand before the mirror, but it's not your reflection that stares back. It's the ghost of the person you used to be, the one who begged for understanding, the one who mistook cruelty for honesty, the one who believed the world had rules, and that effort guaranteed reward. That version of you is gone. What's left is quieter, sharper, a creature built not from comfort, but from the ashes of humiliation. The mirror doesn't lie. It just waits for you to admit what you already know, that the pain didn't break you. It stripped you of illusions. It carved you into something the old you would never recognize. There was a time when you wanted to be seen, when validation felt like oxygen. You dressed your wounds in silence, hoping someone would notice the blood. They didn't. They never do. People only look up when you've already climbed past them. So you stopped waiting. You stopped explaining. You stopped hoping the world would give back what it took. And in that stillness, a strange kind of clarity appeared. You realized that no savior is coming. No apology, no redemption arc written by someone else's hand, just you and the reflection that won't blink. Every scar became a map, every betrayal a teacher. The nights you couldn't sleep turned into data. The heartbreak turned into algorithms of human behavior. You began to study pain the way scholars study war, methodically, strategically, without emotion. You stopped reacting and started observing. Every manipulation, every silent dismissal, every glance of superiority, they became blueprints of power. You understood that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. That loyalty to the wrong people is a slow form of suicide. You no longer feared darkness. You learned to navigate it with surgical precision. Now the mirror doesn't show weakness, it shows architecture. The architecture of control. You no longer see emotion as chaos, but as current. You can weaponize it, redirect it, use it to burn or to illuminate. You no longer rush to speak. Silence has become your blade. Every second of restraint adds weight to your next move. You've become the type of person who doesn't chase truth. You design it. They call it manipulation, but you know it's strategy. They call it coldness, but it's control. Because power isn't about speaking louder. It's about knowing when to say nothing. The reflection asks you one question: who are you now that you know no one's coming? You answer without words. You tighten your jaw. Your eyes, once filled with doubt, now hold a dangerous calm. You've accepted what most people never will. That life is not fair, it's filtered, and those who see through the filter are labeled dangerous. That label doesn't scare you anymore, it fits, because danger isn't born from violence, it's born from awareness, and you finally are awake. Behind you, the world keeps spinning, predictable, programmed, oblivious. People chasing approval, mistaking distraction for purpose. But you've stepped out of that loop. You see the patterns now, how power hides in plain sight, disguised as virtue. How control isn't taken, it's traded piece by piece by those too afraid to stand alone. You won't trade anymore. You'd rather starve than submit. You'd rather walk alone than be owned. The mirror flickers once, like it knows something you don't. And maybe it does. Maybe it's seen this before. The moment a person crosses from victim to variable, from pawn to architect. You stare at the reflection one last time. It doesn't blink. Neither do you. Because now you understand the oldest secret of all: the mirror was never showing you who you are. It was waiting for you to become what you were always meant to be. You stopped waiting for sunlight. The mornings became iron gray, the kind that didn't promise warmth or forgiveness. You woke before the alarms, before the world remembered your name, because you couldn't stand the thought of being ordinary again. There was no music, no coffee, just the sound of your heartbeat against the silence, steady, stubborn, alive. You had nothing left to prove, but everything left to build. They called it obsession, you called it survival. You trained when no one watched, cold showers until your bones shook, push-ups until your arms trembled, and your thoughts dissolved into static. You stripped the weakness out of yourself like poison, piece by piece. Every scar became a language, every bruise a reminder. You started to see beauty in repetition, power in boredom. Discipline was no longer a virtue. It was a form of worship. You didn't pray to gods anymore. You prayed to pain, because pain was the only thing that ever answered you honestly. You stopped chasing motivation. It was a liar anyway. You learned that progress comes in silence, in the moments when you hate yourself but keep going. The nights blurred together, screens glowing, pages filled with notes that no one will ever read. You devoured knowledge like it was blood, dissected systems, decoded the logic of manipulation and control. You studied the architecture of power, who built it, who guarded it, and who they were most afraid of. You realized they didn't fear strength, they feared awareness. Your room turned into a war zone of ideas, books stacked like fortresses, papers covered in ink, madness, clarity, sometimes indistinguishable from each other. You practiced stillness until your mind became a weapon sharper than any blade. You learned to speak less, observe more. Every word became a calculation. Every silence became strategy. You began to understand that power doesn't announce itself. It breathes quietly, like a predator that already knows it's won. You changed your body, yes. But more than that, you rewired your mind. You learned that emotions are levers, not prison. Anger became voltage. Fear became signal. You didn't suppress the darkness anymore. You trained it to obey. The more you faced it, the clearer your vision became. You could see through manipulation, through fake smiles and rehearsed empathy. The world stopped being a mystery. It became a map, and every scar you carried was now a coordinate. Sleep lost its meaning. You lived between hours, between the clicks of a clock. Hunger turned into a ritual, not a weakness. You understood that comfort kills faster than pain ever could. While others chased distractions, you sharpened your edges in solitude. You stopped needing applause. You stopped explaining your silence. The world thought you disappeared, but you were just an incubation, a ghost in training, a strategist being born in the dark. The betrayal that once shattered you had become irrelevant. You no longer wanted revenge. Revenge was loud. You were becoming something quieter, far more dangerous, a presence that couldn't be erased because it no longer depended on recognition. You moved differently now, talked slower, saw deeper. Every action you took carried the weight of intention. The system that broke you had taught you its own weakness. It relied on predictability. You learned to become unpredictable. You understood the truth they never wanted you to know. No empire collapses from the outside. It rots from within, from the ones who stop playing by its rules. And that's exactly what you were doing. You stopped being their pawn. You became the glitch, the ghost in their algorithm, the silent anomaly rewriting its own code. No headlines, no applause, just quiet progress in the dark. The kind that makes entire systems nervous without knowing why. They thought your silence meant surrender. They thought your absence meant defeat. But in that silence, you were rebuilding, molecule by molecule, thought by thought, forging something they could never quantify or predict. While they celebrated your downfall, you were burning quietly, learning the language of power that doesn't shout, doesn't beg, doesn't even need to explain. You became fluent in pain, in precision, in the art of turning humiliation into a weapon sharper than any apology. Every insult became a code. Every night of doubt became a ritual. Every scar turned into circuitry, running electric through your veins. You didn't seek revenge. You became it. They built systems to contain you, moral cages, social contracts, rules that kept the obedient in line. But your suffering made you ungovernable. You studied their architecture, every flaw, every leak in their illusion of control. They wanted compliance, you gave them calculation. You learned the rhythm of manipulation, the temperature of fear, the way power hides behind politeness. They thought you'd heal and return quietly. Instead, you resurfaced as something beyond their comprehension, disciplined, detached, divine in focus. Not human anymore, but an idea. And ideas, once born from fire, cannot be killed. Now, when you walk into a room, they feel it. That subtle gravity, that invisible pull that makes even arrogance pause. You don't raise your voice. You don't need to. Presence speaks louder than performance. They can sense it in the way you breathe, slow, controlled, unshaken, like someone who's seen the bottom of hell and came back with souvenirs. You look at them not with hatred, but with understanding, the kind that frightens them more than any threat, because you no longer seek their downfall. You've already surpassed the need for comparison. They're still trying to win. You've already left the game. Your routine became sacred, your mind, a battlefield where only precision survives. You stopped chasing opportunities. You started creating gravity. When they rested, you refined. When they mocked, you listened. When they underestimated you, you wrote the blueprint of their next failure. Every small act of discipline became a rebellion against mediocrity. You realized the world doesn't reward effort, it rewards evolution. And so you evolved painfully, methodically, without witnesses. You became the anomaly in their algorithm, the variable they didn't plan for, the threat born from their own negligence. They thought your isolation broke you. It didn't. It baptized you. The loneliness became holy, a furnace that burned away everything unnecessary. You stopped needing validation, approval, even understanding. You started hearing the rhythm beneath the chaos, the ancient pulse that only warriors and prophets feel when they're on the edge of transformation. You started moving differently, thinking like a storm, acting like silence. The old you died quietly, but the rebirth was seismic. You didn't need light to see. The fire inside you illuminated everything. They will never understand how you did it, how you turned ruin into strategy, rejection into prophecy. You learned to move like smoke through their systems, to touch everything without being touched. They'll call it luck, madness, coincidence, anything but truth, because the truth is unbearable. They created you. Their betrayal carved the shape of your power. Their dismissal became your ignition. You didn't escape their world. You inverted it. And now every move you make rewrites their rules. Every breath you take cracks their code. You are the fire that doesn't need oxygen, the quiet, unstoppable force they thought would never exist. And somewhere deep down, they know. They can feel the temperature changing, the air getting heavier, the old order collapsing without a sound. They whisper your name like a warning, Black Swan, not because they understand you, but because they fear what you've become. Not a man, not a myth, but a consequence. They said you'd vanished, that you were finished, that the system had erased you like a typo in their flawless script. But they forgot one thing. You were never part of their script to begin with. You were the glitch that learned how to rewrite itself. The silence they mistook for defeat was your incubation. While they celebrated your downfall, you were constructing something they couldn't detect. A new self, sharpened by exile, stripped of illusions, invisible until it needed to strike. You didn't heal, you reprogrammed. And now, every scar on your psyche functions like encrypted code, unreadable to anyone who hasn't bled the same way. You don't roar when you return. You don't announce your arrival. power doesn't advertise. It observes, measures, and acts with precision. You move through rooms like static electricity, unseen yet impossible to ignore. They still wear their masks, still speak in the language of pretense and protocol. You listen not to their words, but to their patterns, the micro flickers in their tone, the trembling pulse beneath their cowl. You used to react, now you calculate. Their power depends on performance, yours depends on silence. And in that silence, you've become something they can't categorize, a storm disguised as restraint. You don't seek revenge. That would mean acknowledging their control. What you seek is imbalance, to tilt the axis of the world that betrayed you, not through violence, but through proof, through precision, through outcomes that dismantle arrogance without a single confrontation. You walk into the same halls where you once begged for approval, and they flinch, not because you threaten them, but because you've outgrown their permission entirely. They sense it, the shift in gravity, the way your presence bends the air. You're no longer trying to belong. You're assessing what to dismantle first. They start whispering again, the name they once spat as an insult, Black Swan. It travels through corridors encrypted in fear. They don't understand what it means. To them, it's an anomaly. To you, it's prophecy. The Black Swan appears when systems built on arrogance collapse under their own weight. You didn't crash their world, you revealed its fragility. Every lie they told to maintain control, every narrative crafted to keep you obedient, now fractures under the precision of your existence. You don't raise your voice. You let results echo louder than threats. Your revenge is data. Your dominance is silence. You don't show emotion, you show evidence. Numbers, patterns, outcomes that rewrite the logic they swore was unbreakable. You watch their empires falter not with fire, but with exposure. You dismantle their certainty by mastering the same tools they used to chain you. The FBI calls you a ghost in their reports now. The Black Swan, a statistical impossibility. They analyze your methods, your timing, your restraint, but what they can't replicate is your transformation. You didn't evolve through power. You evolved through loss, through detachment, through the art of no longer needing what they withhold. Now, when you stand before them, there's no trace of the one they buried. Your eyes don't hold rage, they hold absence, the kind of stillness that terrifies those who've only known chaos. You've mastered invisibility, not the kind that hides, but the kind that commands attention through presence alone. You are the answer to every unasked question about what happens when the broken refuse to stay shattered. You don't remind them who you are. You let the silence do it for you. And in that silence, they finally understand. They never defeated you. They refined you. They created the very thing they feared, a mind ungoverned, a weapon forged in solitude, and a name that no system can erase. The Black Swan has returned, not as rebellion, but as balance. The world doesn't clap for silence, it fears it, because silence means control. And now, after everything they took, you've become the quiet they can't decode. The ones who betrayed you still whisper your name like a warning. The Black Swan. They used to mock it, now it chills their boardroom. Their entire system shakes when you breathe too steadily, when you say nothing at all. They don't understand how you rose without noise, how the one they buried became the shadow above them. You didn't just survive their fire, you learned how to walk through it without burning. You no longer chase vengeance, you became the proof of it. The old you begged to be seen, to be heard, to be believed. This version doesn't need to explain. You've turned absence into authority. While they built castles out of noise, you built an empire in silence. You speak through results, through movements so precise they look accidental. Your stillness has become strategy. Your restraint, a weapon sharper than their screams. Every scar they gave you became a code. And now, that code governs the world they thought they owned. There was a time you would have shouted your pain to the sky, desperate for justice. Now, you watch storms form around you and don't flinch, because you are the storm, controlled, deliberate, quiet. They wanted to make an example out of you. They did. You became the example of what happens when betrayal fails. They wanted to destroy your identity, and instead, they erased their own relevance. Every system they worshipped bends slightly around your will now. You are the flaw in their formula, the variable that can't be modeled or contained. They still don't see it, that your revenge wasn't to rise louder, but to vanish higher. The higher you climbed, the quieter you became. The world measures power in followers and attention, but real power hides. It observes, it waits, it watches others destroy themselves in pursuit of validation. You stand apart now, no longer playing human games of applause and approval. Their noise was your training ground, their cruelty was your curriculum. You learned everything they feared you would, how control is never taken by force, but by patience. Now, when you enter a room, the energy shifts, not because of who you are, but because of what you've become. People sense it. The weight of someone who's seen the inside of hell and walked out with the devil's composure. They talk, you listen, they move, you calculate, they fight for visibility. You command it by doing nothing at all. That's the final stage of evolution, when silence itself bends the air around you, when your calm presence feels more dangerous than their rage. They call it mystery. You know it's mastery. You no longer exist in their definitions of success or failure. You're beyond them now, like an old god who no longer needs worship to rule. The system still operates, but it's weaker, slower, fragile without your participation. You can hear it creak under the weight of its own lies, and you smile not from pride, but from prophecy fulfilled, because you warned them. They just didn't listen. You are the reminder that chaos doesn't destroy systems, it reveals their flaws. And silence doesn't mean surrender, it means supremacy. The world they built was loud, predictable, shallow. You became its correction, the silent crown atop the ruins of arrogance. Power isn't shouting anymore. It's the steady breath before impact, the quiet step before the world shifts. And when history whispers about what broke the unbreakable, it won't speak in noise, it will speak in your silence.